gentlemen, please welcome.
And you already know what time it is. Every Tuesday night at 8, another edition of the MCW Cast. I'm Legacy MCW announcer Larry Legend.
I'm Dan McDevitt.
And I'm Tara. Welcome to the cast.
And welcome back, Dan.
Thank you. My sabbatical is over.
Would you go on a pilgrimage?
Yeah.
How do you look like you got a little bit of a tan?
Well, that was from yard work on Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, that wasn't any special trips. Just pulling weeds in the yard.
Yeah, and being out there under that sun for just a little bit over this weekend, it was a real scorcher.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God. It was brutal.
Mm-hmm.
It was friggin' brutal.
With all the cicadas. For our non-Maryland listeners, we are in
God.
the throes of cicada season here. So there is lots of cicada fornication taking place at very loud decibels. So I don't know about you all, but my yard is very, very loud.
And there's a lot of good cicada recipes on the internet.
There are. I really want to get
Try
them.
one?
But well, I found people were selling them online. You could just buy the kind, and then you could cook them yourself. So that you freeze them. But you need the larva stage. So as soon as they emerge from their shell, you need it when they're like kind of white colored and wiggly, not when they have their wings. Mm-hmm. So you need to collect those and then freeze them to humanely kill them, and then you can do with them what you would like, deep fry them or whatever.
I'll pass.
But I just feel like that's a little bit too much work because I don't have time to be gathering up, certain life stages of the cicada. But you can buy them on the internet that are already in the appropriate life form.
When I was younger, I think one time they were around when I was like 10 or 11, and there was a guy lived in our neighborhood in a wheelchair, and he would just bite them. And like all the kids thought it was the greatest thing that we just pick him up and bring him to him, and he'd like brush him and just,
oh my God,
and he would just eat for hours, and we thought it was the greatest thing to just.
They are high protein and low carb.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that traumatized me from a young age with cicadas. I couldn't. Now you see recipes. I don't know. I'll pass on the cicada recipes.
Yeah, I think I was a little bit younger than you when they were around, not 17 years ago. That would have been 2004. But when I was, a little one, and they were exciting back then to me to catch them because I was mischievous and always catching things. My parents wouldn't let me have pets when I was a little one, so I would catch things and make them my pets. And I just remember at one point I caught as many as I possibly could fit in a jar, to the point that the ones on the bottom were literally crushed by the ones on top. And all I would do was just fill the jar up with as much grass as I could and watch them just devour the grass in really, really quick fashion. And it was just so fun and amazing to me. And then I think I poured them all out and stomped on them.
Probably.
Yeah, They're an indispensable resource. Millions of these.
I didn't know. Well, they say a 1 acre plot has 1.5 million cicadas on it. So, and I didn't realize that this was some sort of unique thing to the Northeast. Like, I just thought the whole world erupted in swarms of cicadas when I was a kid. And I remember the last time they were here, I was working at a summer camp, and the kids would just take butterfly nets and just scoop them through the air, and it was. There were a lot. And of course they were like little kids, so they were fascinated by this. They thought it was great. But anyway, so here it is, cicada season. We got probably 4 to 6 more weeks of this left. So
great.
Yes, how exciting. It's only the guys that are making the noise. Because they got to put on a show because they're attracting a mate. So they have to be all loud. So it's, I don't know.
Leave it to us guys to be
right,
making all the noise. So
the show off. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, back to the podcast. Make sure you're checking us out on all of our major podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Google Play, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Breaker, Radio Public, and CastBox. Whew.
That's right. And for all of those platforms, make sure that you subscribe. It's one thing to be able to listen to us on them, but subscribe so that we can get our algorithm up there and continue forging the path that we are. Impressive numbers so far, we've got a lot of people that listen and enjoy, and we want that to continue on into episode 21. But this is episode 20, so from all of us, thank you for tuning in to the MCW Cast faithfully every Tuesday at 8, and don't forget about subscribing to all of our podcast platforms out there.
And sharing and liking the streams if you're watching on social media.
That's right.
And if you're feeling generous, buy us some coffee at buymeacoffee.com. buymeacoffee.com/MCW Cast. Sorry, I always get that wrong, but we've got that up on our screen so you can do that. And thank you to our supporters who have been with us for 20 episodes now. Now, last week we had Kakoa in studio.
The
it was
last
great to
rating
catch up with him.
MCW champion Kakoa. It was great to hear his story.
I know, and congrats to his new daughter and his new life with his wife Sammy down in Florida. So it was great that he was able to come up here and drop in for the night.
It sure was.
And while I'm disappointed, I missed that episode. Not as much as I'm disappointed that I missed 2 episodes ago with the Playboy Dad.
Oh my goodness.
We've
Bobby
already decided
Star.
we're bringing him back. Like
Yeah.
we had
we
much
have
more to talk about
We
with
have way
him, and
more
we didn't
talk
get to
about.
it.
He has
and
way more to talk
He
about.
has a lot. He's got too much to talk about.
And
so
we've
we're gonna
got
bring
more
him
to
back.
listen to out of the legendary icon, Hollywood Playboy, pretty
We
boy
had
Bob
so many
Star.
questions for him too.
That was the one thing. Yeah, the response for Bob
we had
was overwhelming.
Was it really?
we had a ton of questions for him.
We had to
Well, Bob, he's done a lot, man. He was in that era of doing jobs. Man, he did it for years, He was in the, we joke about Bob and you know what I mean? Bob, Bob's one of them guys in wrestling that's like a character that like there's only one Bob Star.
Yeah.
And
Like Dennis Stamp.
like a Dennis Stamp, like an Iron Sheik, like so many guys that are just so unique.
Unique, yeah.
So very unique that it's like, man, there's only one of that guy, and Bob's like our local guy like that.
Yep.
And but man, he hundreds of like squash matches he did, and all of the names probably in the late 80s and 90s, most of the 90s,
Yeah,
he was
he told us
probably
all
in the
about
ring
him.
with.
Yeah.
Even if only for a couple minutes, on a Saturday morning quick match, he was
Mr.
in the ring
Worldwide.
with him. When those type of matches, when those type of like enhancement matches, as they were called, happen, that don't happen at all anymore, rarely. Bob was like one of the main guys that you saw on TV almost every week.
It's true. And I just saw recently, not too long ago, there was a WWE show where zombies were featured. I don't even remember. I don't want to dwell on it that much. But the point that I wanted to make is that one of the zombies was Scott Too Hot Taylor. And I remember that Scott Too Hot Taylor, Scotty Too Hottie, for those that don't know, was one of the first enhancement guys that they used on the original Raw. From the Manhattan Center. And I just thought to myself,
Isn't he a coach or something, a trainer at NXT?
whatever he is, from jobbing to a check for life, he has essentially been an employee of WWE since '93, off and on.
Yeah.
And that is one hell of a tenure.
So speaking of that whole segment with the zombies, did you watch the zombie movie with Batista on Netflix?
No, I didn't.
I thought it was good. It was have you watched it?
No.
That was plugging. I guess that was.
That's
the
what I
intent of
heard.
plugging
Yeah, I
movie.
heard that was like.
That was the deal. Like it was supposed to. It was good. It was a different take on zombies. Like they were smart. Like some of them were smart. Like in a lot of zombie movies, they're just like dumb and
Mindless,
they just try
yeah.
to kill you. These
Yeah.
like could think, and there was like a leader. It was a different take on zombies that I actually thought it was pretty good. Like
Upon your recommendation, I'm going to watch it because I am a big zombie movie, a big horror fan. But I don't do Netflix. I only did Netflix when I had my Wii up and at 'em. And since I don't live in New York anymore and cable and all that stuff is more affordable now that I'm a Marylanditer again.
And there was irony in that too. Like I saw like a Chris Jericho tweet, wasn't it? Like 2 weeks before that, like WWE made the comment like they set the business back 30 years, AEW with their blood and guts, and then they have zombies come out.
It was a little volley. WWE was like, you set the business back 30 years because I guess Jericho took an insane fall, very similar to the types of insane falls that we've seen Shane McMahon do several times, and Mick Foley, in my estimation, originated. They were like, you set the business back 30 years.
And then zombies
come out. Yeah. And zombies that everyone was selling for. I heard that one of the big things was that the commentators were scared. And
No, really?
Oh, yeah.
Did you see it?
I watched little clips afterwards.
It was bad.
Well, when I first saw people posting about it, I was like, oh, that seems kind of fun because I like zombies too. And I was like, oh, okay, that's not that bad. But I listened to a little bit of it that people were sharing, and I was like, so we're pretending they're real? That was really what got me. I was like, oh.
So that's the thing, Tara. I guess when I first heard about it, I thought, they were kind of like background scenery to set the tone for the.
They put the zombies over.
Yeah,
that was what
and rightfully so, because a lot of those zombies were comprised of a lot of indie darlings that had gotten their picture taken with the property of World Wrestling Entertainment T-shirt on not too long ago.
Well, apparently it was. I read that it was like a big, like I guess that zombie movie. Because Batista was in it, I was reading it. It was like a big payday for WWE.
It was, and that's what it is.
For the promotion
was
of
this
that
one
movie.
of the movies they produced under
no,
their umbrella?
No, it wasn't theirs, but I
movie?
think like one of like the promotion company or something, what I was reading, because Batista was in it, they figured to go to the WWE audience. Like I heard it was like millions.
I'm sure.
For WWE to just.
And I'm sure it worked. I'm sure people are watching it. I want to watch it. We're talking about it right now, you know. So.
Well, I'd rather watch the zombie movie than go back and watch the whole match again, I think.
Yeah, I would have watched the zombie movie regardless of whether they would have attacked somebody in a WWE ring.
I think I would rather do that.
Yeah, because the zombies that were attacking people at the WWE show were not the same zombies that were in the movie.
Right.
No,
they were following the rules of a lumberjack match.
They were the BWO zombies.
Lumberjacks wouldn't be attacking people, so I don't know. Well, anyway.
All right, well.
Back to other matches.
Yeah, back to reality.
Our Flashback Friday this week is Christopher Daniels versus AJ Styles right here in MCW during the phenomenal Final Four in 2006. I completely forgot the name of that show, but I remember being at the show, and you announced that night.
So you know what? I remember.
That was like the second or third show back.
Yeah. I remember that was the first time I ever got the honor of announcing AJ Styles, but I had totally forgotten about that show. Those were some wild days. I feel like because we were doing a lot. We had just come back. We had packed that North Point flea market.
Yeah.
The fire exit announcement started around that time. So those were some really just like all of a sudden it was over. Yeah, fun times, stressful times, and I don't remember that the show was called the.
I did not remember the name either. I had no idea. So, but I remember the night and I remember that match. Like I remember a lot about that. I just had no idea we had a show called that.
So that's our Flashback Friday. Remember, like and share that off of the YouTube. And I think we need to take a brief pause before we get on to our guest.
Yeah, who's our guest this week?
Oh, man, I'm so excited. Please, this punch. I'm not going to call him by what I originally announced him as, but I will say in the house with us, Pat Brink.
Genesis.
Well, that's what I wanted to say, but I thought he would throttle me. No. Like, that was his deal. Genesis is what I know him and love him as. The first moniker he had when I met him.
MCW OG.
OG indeed, from the Michael's 8th Avenue days.
All right, we'll talk to him as soon as we come right back.
We hope you're enjoying this week's episode of the MCW Cast. At MCW Pro Wrestling, much like many small businesses throughout the country, the pandemic has presented many challenges. For a company like ours that hosts events with live audiences, the impact has been even more severe, and all of our forms of revenue have been cut off. In order to continue to engage with our fans on a regular basis, we made the decision to begin to produce the MCW Cast and are providing it for absolutely no cost on Facebook Live, Twitch, YouTube, and SoundCloud. If you'd like to support us during these challenging times, you can do so in several ways. The most popular way is to buy us a coffee to help fuel the cast. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/MCWcast, and for just $3, you can buy the cast a coffee. Or you can choose to become a member of the cast for just $5 a month and receive several special perks. That's buymeacoffee.com/MCWcast. You can also contribute directly on Cash App, MCW Wrestling, or on Venmo, MCW-Wrestling. You can also show your support for the MCW Cast while sporting some great gear by going to teespring.com/stores/MCWcast to pick up a full line of official MCW Cast merchandise, from coffee mugs and face coverings to t-shirts and sweatshirts. Also, don't forget to comment in the threads on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch to get your questions answered on a future episode. And you can also send us a tweet using the hashtag AskMCWCast. Thank you for your support, and now, back to the show.
With us in studio, Pat Brink, Genesis. Thank you for joining us here on the MCW Cast.
Thanks for having me. I can't promise I'll be half as fun as Bob Starr or have any of the stories, but it's great to be here.
You'd have to have a hell of a career to be able to have as many stories as Bob, but I think that yours rivals his as far as Maryland wrestling history is concerned, and that's what we want to talk to you about tonight.
You're being kind there.
Well, Pat, you and I go way back. My first show here at MCW was your first show at MCW, actually, live event.
You guys had the same day?
So yeah, with me helping out, I had come down to the school, but the first time that Mark was like, this is when you're going to be working, was the October the 30th show right after 9/11. At Michael's 8th Avenue. Couple pinpoints that I'll never forget.
Was that our first show after 9/11?
That was our first show. It was the Firefighters Benefit Show. And it was the show that Axel returned. I think he saved you from Bruiser and from Redneck Billy Redwood. And he came out and saved you. That was a pinpoint. And also, your debut against the Black... What was he called?
Were you supposed to be on the show at Fort Meade then that got canceled because of 9/11?
I think that was where I was supposed to debut, and then it got pushed to Michael's because of the cancellation.
Do you remember that?
I remember it all. Vaguely, that's when I first landed. I first came
My
around.
brain was... I'll never forget about that. That's what makes me think of like 9/11. Like when people... obviously, it's a big event in our country. But when people say like... people say, like, what were you doing on 9/11? Like, I was arguing with the Army base about why the show was being canceled that Saturday night. That's what I was doing. And I was saying, like, me and Mark, I'll never forget, like, what was wrong with me? That, like, I was arguing with the base, and they're like, this show isn't happening Saturday. And I'm like, there's, like, 800 tickets sold. We have a War Games.
Yeah, it was a real war
I
game.
remember saying to the guy on the base,
best title.
the guy on the base, we've spent a year building up this match. And I mean, really, it's ridiculous to think about. Like, but I was in my early 20s, like the significance of 9/11, this terrorist, and I couldn't believe that the Army base was canceling our show.
Yeah,
for the weekend. Like when I look back now, like what the hell was I thinking? What was wrong with me?
Your scope was just a little bit more narrow. You were a
Yeah.
business person.
But it was like the terrorist attack was in
you
New
know,
York.
yeah. What did,
I don't
right?
think people fully understood the extent that we were
No.
going to be shut down because
Right.
I got married 2 weeks late, not even 2 weeks later, and I remember a couple days after
That
it
was all around that
happened.
time too.
Yeah, I remember
Wow.
a couple days after it happened, my florist called me and said, "Hey, just so you know, you might have to have the orange daylilies from my backyard." And I went, "Why?" And she's like, because the planes can't, like the flowers don't grow here. Like they bring them in. And I was like, oh. And I just really didn't think about it. And then next thing I knew, people were canceling. My out-of-town people who were flying in were canceling because they couldn't get a flight. And I was like, wow. So I don't know that everybody knew at that moment. Like when it happened, I was doing landscaping and my customer was working in the towers. And so I was really just thinking, oh my gosh, is my customer dead? And so I wasn't thinking that. So I don't know that everybody thought the wide-reaching effects that it had. So like you being worried about the show going actually seems like a fairly normal response.
For someone that was so consumed with wrestling.
I mean, I remember it well, too. I think we ended up going to a show somewhere that weekend that didn't get canceled right after 9/11, and you had kind of wound down from that and understood it at that point. But I'm sure
I was still
I'm sure on
pretty
September
mad.
12th it was a different
Right.
Yeah, it was a big show.
You started training, I believe, Pat, right before I did, like 2 months or so before I did, I think.
No, I had actually started in my training really took off in probably January of 2000. And I signed up at the school in like 99, but
okay,
really
so there's a couple
made a
more.
plan,
Okay.
and I started training in January of 2000, and in like August that year or September.
That's when I came, was
when
August.
you came in,
Got
I
it.
tore my ACL in my right knee.
That's
as they
right.
were,
Oh, I forgot about that.
I was getting ready to start on shows then.
I thought
and I
so.
tore my ACL, and I was, out for 9 months with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back to training right at this Ricky Steamboat camp we did.
Right.
Which that was like his first thing in the business in like 8 years at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, from the Steamboat camp on, and just it ended up being October of
That's right.
2000.
That's
we
right.
we originated a lot of things. We were one of the first people that did one of those camps.
Yeah, the
like
Well,
that.
now anybody can have
Now-
a seminar.
I mean,
now
but now,
you have a
yeah.
minute in the business, and all of a sudden you're running a seminar.
Don't get me started on that. When I see-
Right. But we did great ones. Like, I
Yeah,
remember
I remember that,
Steamboat
like-
one was fantastic.
Yoko.
That was just
Yeah.
an idea I had with Ricky Steamboat. Like, I talked to him, I just wanted to do something, and he wanted to do something different than an autograph signing. And I remember, now they're everywhere. But that was like original back in the day.
And then it culminated with Dan having a match with Steamboat.
Oh yeah,
You know, the second day, Steamboat did the Randy Savage Steamboat finish from WrestleMania 3. I remember it vividly, man.
Yeah,
it was,
yeah.
Wow.
It was a good
yeah,
time, man.
yeah.
It was.
Yeah, we went
You
through
worked
the.
Ricky Steamboat.
Oh yeah, I totally crapped my pants, man. Because
Yeah,
I
it
had
was
been
about
telling
8
him.
minutes, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I had been telling him like how big of a mark I was for him growing up when I was talking to him, like booking him and all that. And then he's like, really, this and that. And then he looked around and he said to me like, are there any cameras recording this? And I was like, no. And then all of a sudden he like cut loose. I guess I don't remember why. Like he didn't want anything recording at the time. But then all of a sudden he's like, let's go. And we just started doing the Steamboat Savage match. And
Yeah,
I
it was a
like,
spur of the moment. Like you know, he called him on and called him in, and like Steamboat called the whole thing on the fly, man.
Yeah,
It was
and
cool.
just
That's
called
amazing.
it.
What a
Yeah.
moment.
Yep.
I was a little aroused
I wouldn't blame you.
during that. Like, oh my
Yeah.
god.
Now I'm like thinking about how long ago that was, and I'm like, man, I just feel old now. You know, that was 20
All right,
years
well, let's
ago.
not dwell on it. It was a long
It was
time
20
ago.
years
a
ago,
long
yeah.
time ago, yeah.
Yeah. God.
Yes.
Well, speaking of a long time ago, let's talk a little bit about your how you got involved, or what led you to a career of being a professional wrestler. What got you into it when you were younger?
Oh my gosh, man. So, you know, my father watched wrestling a lot when I was a kid, and I was captivated and moved by it, by the guys, by the, you know, performances, by the things that as a kid that grabbed me that you just don't realize. Like it just had me, man. And it was an escape for me. We were like dirt poor living in Baltimore City, row homes, got picked on in a lot of neighborhoods I lived in and things like that. And it was just my escape, man. And I just, fell in love with it very, very young. And as I came to Bone Breakers, really the thing for me was as a kid, as I envisioned trying to get into wrestling, I envisioned like getting into wrestling as more like a referee or something like that, because I was actually a small kid. When I turned 16 years old, I was like 5'3" and 110 pounds. I was what you call like a late bloomer, very late bloomer, which I think has kind of helped me at this stage of life. But back then it was brutal, and then it just I started growing out of nowhere from the beginning point of my junior year of high school to the end of high school. I grew like 7 inches. And then, it just continued to taper up until I was like 24. I think I remember even being 24 and telling people I was 6'2", and I was standing next to a guy that was 6'2", and he was like, "No, you got me by a few inches." And I was like, measured myself, and I was like 6'5", and I was like, "Oh, well, then I'm 6'5", So.
Was there any in particular match that you can remember? Like a lot of the times we have guests on, and it's always family. A lot of the reoccurring themes that we hear is it's like my dad.
This was a family activity, right? Yeah, it was for me too.
Is tied with family, but is there any one match you can remember where you're like, okay, I'm hooked to this, or any one character that really like kind of really sees young Pat and
Yeah, the first guy that it was really two guys, but it was Lex Luger and it was Sting. And I was really grabbed. Luger was fresh into the Horsemen. I mean, he was a young kid, and he just looked like a pro wrestler. Or what people thought back then was a look of a pro wrestler. And I was just sort of captivated by the by the torture rack, by his whole angle, by watching him get kicked out of the Horsemen and turn babyface. And Sting came along and had his feud with the Horsemen. And then there was like the Ultimate Warrior. Ultimate Warrior was my guy. I remember thinking the first time I saw Ultimate Warrior, he looks like Sting and Luger kind of rolled into one. And that was
my guy too, Pat.
Yeah. I think he was. Warrior
Oh,
was his guy, man.
Sting and Warrior for me.
So,
but that A&E documentary on the Warrior, on the Ultimate Warrior, was really good. But for someone that was a humongous Sting and Ultimate Warrior fan, huge. God, they were terrible. In that documentary they showed, and Sting talked about how bad they were when they went to like Memphis, and they showed their matches.
yeah.
and they were awful.
Oh yeah.
Like they were like you see bad indie wrestlers today, like on Facebook and YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow! Sting and the Ultimate Warrior in their first matches rivaled any terrible independent wrestler that you see out there today.
So
they were terrible.
Was
like
this
you
like an authorized
A&E.
documentary?
It was done through A&E. So like they I don't know if WWE had that Memphis footage. I don't know if they own that, but they got it. But like even Sting was joking about like we were terrible.
Yeah.
But they showed clips of the matches, and they were really bad.
I mean, some of them were back then. I mean, you know, there was
But
that,
you didn't
that
realize,
look. There was
you know
the
what I
big,
mean? Like,
giant,
I guess-
muscle-bound guys, you know, that
You
looked
have
good.
to watch the
but
documentary
not
just for that like
necessarily
couple minutes where
performed
they
well.
show it, and you're like, oh
It's
my god, these guys.
Weird because the business was protected back then.
Yeah.
But yet it's almost like if you watch it now with our eyes now, you're like, no wonder people didn't believe you. You
Yeah.
know? No wonder you know it was a work, man.
No wonder people made fun of you for watching that
I
stuff.
can't even remember his name, man, but there was this guy, I want to say in Continental Wrestling or somewhere. He's a big, tall guy, and he had his face painted green. I know his name, and it's just totally
The Missing
slick.
Link?
Yes, and
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, it's just you watch some of that footage, and it's like, how are you trying to pass that off? You guys were going to bars and fighting people because you wanted people to believe it was real.
And that's what they did, though. That's like in the Watts territories
yeah.
and all that. That's what they did, you know. And Watts, Bill Watts' rule, like if you lost a bar fight, you were fired. It didn't matter. Like that was all real. I talked to Jim Ross. Like that was all real. Like if you went and got in a bar fight with somebody a mark,
Well,
and you lost a bar fight, you were fired.
Well, it was like an extension of the carnival days. There would be marks in the crowd that the shooter would be able to stretch. But if someone really volunteered, like, hey, I can take that guy, and he got up there on stage and embarrassed the actual shooter, fire him and bring the local boy. Hey, you want to make a couple
Right.
bucks on the road with you? We're going to
Right.
take this show on the road.
Yeah, I guess that was their version of social media. How like they got word to spread or got people over.
Yeah,
Like,
word of mouth.
Yeah, word of mouth. You know, like
Publicity sells tickets, whether it's good or bad, you know?
Yeah.
So,
like the legend of Haku, right?
Yeah, biting the guy's nose
all the
off.
legend of, you know, people still today like they talk about Haku being the toughest guy. All those like stories of just him killing people in bars
Yeah.
are just, you know, that of legend.
so now, other than Sting and Luger, was there someone like that you tried to emulate? Like, as you decided, hey, I'm going to be a wrestler, was there someone that you were looking to for like your inner inspiration?
Yeah, the main guy, when I decided to get into business, the main guy I had become, you know, quite a fan of was Scott Hall, like specifically like his Razor Ramon character.
I remember you saying that.
You know, I was fascinated with, you know, like the Scarface movie as a kid, and I knew his character was directly from that. Like I knew it as a kid, but it was confirmed by him in interviews much later, and so he was my guy, and it was like one of those things that as I was breaking into the business to find out, like, yes, this guy's actually a great worker too, you know, because there are guys that you found that you love him as a kid,
Ultimate
and then as you
Warrior.
come in the business, you find out, man, he wasn't that great of a worker, and
Yeah.
Right.
Paul was revered.
At
you
16
know?
years
So-
old, I would have told you the Ultimate Warrior was the greatest professional wrestler that ever lived. Now at like 47 years old, I'm like, you know, like
I have him tattooed on my arm, for God's
Yeah.
sake,
But
and there's some
re-
questionable things he stands
I
for.
recently saw something.
and they covered that in the documentary.
Yeah.
His wife did.
You know, I recently saw something from Jim Ross when he was asked about saying the greatest wrestler of all time, and he talked about how subjective it is. He said, greatest by what term? In-ring performance, dollars drawn at the box office, et cetera, et cetera. So theoretically, Warrior is one of the all-time
Oh, God, you
greatest
have a tattoo?
because,
That's
you
what I
know,
was thinking in my
do.
head. I was
yeah,
like,
by
yeah.
dollars drawn, and at the end of the day, in a business, from a business standpoint,
Greatest of
in a
all
world
time.
sport,
You
maybe
know,
not the greatest of all time, but probably up
He's
there,
in the
top 10.
Yeah, he's in the
With
conversation.
money, there's money
yeah.
drawn, you know,
Yeah,
like
top 10 probably.
yeah, they put his face on
and
everything.
Again, you look at his documentary. He may have been even higher, but just man, I didn't realize how many times he got fired, and Vince fired him for years at a time, and they were all they could have been good money making years that just went by. That he could have been even more in the conversation than he was had he just kind of, I guess, not had his issues that are
yeah, and
that
then
kind of created his legacy.
and then all those years later, he gave that speech on Raw and died the next day.
Yeah, that's
That
crazy
was
here.
sad, man.
I know. I remember that.
We were
like,
out the night before.
Yeah.
I remember watching
Yeah.
that, and I was
We were
like,
at a comedy
why is
show
he
with
so red? There's something wrong with him.
Tara, 100%.
Yeah.
Now when you watch that back, you're like,
I said it at the
You could
time.
see- you
I
could
said
see
it.
it at
I
the time.
remember
You could
it.
tell, yeah.
And
I
I
mean,
said it. Like,
yeah.
there's something wrong with him.
His wife goes into actually real detail of like that, when they were in the hotel and he, his wife goes into detail about how they were in the hotel and then he said something's not right. And then the daughters, and she was telling the daughters, and basically he collapsed right there. And she said she couldn't catch him. It was sad. Like she was like, he was just like a big oak tree and she tried to catch him and he just fell. And then, and it was kind of like that. Like something's wrong. It was sad. It was pretty emotional. Like, and the daughters talking about that the last couple of days and that speech, and it was good. I thought it was really good.
Well, he got the kind of closure that most people don't get, and so that was good that he got it,
Yeah, and it was the whole arc of the whole story of that is so weird because they even, like, his wife and kids talked about how much, like, he was personally hurt by, like, the DVD that I didn't realize that the DVD was intentionally put out as a hit piece on him.
God, yeah.
The self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior.
After the college, after he had that college talk that you're talking about, where he said the questionable to distance themselves from him because it was, people were like, the WWF's Ultimate Warrior, so they intentionally did that to distance themselves from him, and and they talked about how much that hurt him. So like this was the whole coming back and
came full circle.
It came full circle.
I've had people ask me, do you regret getting your tattoo? And I was like, no, because the reason why I got it is because, so for those of you, of course I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt today, but I have Ultimate Warrior tattoo. It's a Starry Night, and in the background it says Always Believe, which was his, whatever, his whole little organization that he did. He used it on his website, mantra, that's it, motto, whatever. And for me, even though I don't agree with a lot of the stuff he said later in life, he was that person that made me believe that I could do this, that made me believe that, there was something special about this. So like when I think back to like what got me going and interested in this business when I was a kid, it was that music hitting, and wherever I was in the house, I'd tear into the living room and I'd be there completely enthralled. So for me, it was I was paying homage and respect to the way I felt inside. So even though I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that he later said, I still don't regret it because, that's what it meant to me. It doesn't mean I believe everything that he said or...
You're a fan of the Ultimate Warrior, not Jim Hellwig.
Right, exactly.
That's what it
not
boils down
the
to.
Warrior. Yeah, not what he changed his name to later when he became just Warrior. Yeah, I'm not...
Well,
like,
that was
I'm
a
not,
whole legal thing anyway.
Right. Yeah, so, I mean...
It was good. It was worth the watch.
I think I'm going to give it a whirl.
If you want something worth the watch of his that's like highly entertaining, there's a video on YouTube of him doing some personal training with these rock musicians. And if you Google it, you'll probably find it, where he wakes them. He's like brought in for this reality show they're trying to pitch, where he wakes this band up at 5 a.m. because of the whole point of fitness being important for musicians too. And it is unbelievably, I won't give you any details of it, one of the funniest things I've ever watched.
And now I got to go look that
up. You have to look that up. Yeah.
Wow.
So, but yeah, he was my guy, man. Him, Scott Hall, Lex Luger, Sting. And then it just, as the business continued to evolve, as I was getting in the business, it was so hot with the NWO and the Attitude Era. And, so it was just like became, when they asked who you like, it was just everybody, you know? And, the longer you're in the business, the more you start picking stuff from everyone. I became the guy for me, once I got in the business, became Triple H. It was just like, man, you really realize, like, once you start seeing the business, how good he really is, and he was the game.
I was such a big fan of the Ultimate Warrior and such a big mark for him that when he regained the Intercontinental title from Rick Rude at SummerSlam. I was watching it on vacation in my parents' condo down on the beach that they got with my family, and I had talked my mom into ordering it. And that was like middle of the pay-per-view. And when he won and beat Rick Rude and regained the Intercontinental title, I ran out of the condo and ran down the beach and never
kept
came
running.
back to watch the rest of the pay-per-view
I've heard this story before.
because nothing else mattered. And I was yelling.
I didn't even care.
I was yelling at people on the beach, the Ultimate Warrior, the Intercontinental Champion again. And I never came back, which I think it was like Zeus.
It
and
was
Savage.
Hogan and Beefcake versus Zeus
Yeah,
and Savage.
I
That was amazing.
I don't.
SummerSlam
I
89,
can't tell you
think.
because I didn't watch the rest of the pay per
That's
view.
so funny.
And
all
I
that
just ran.
matters.
That's how much of a big mark I was for the Warriors. That nothing else mattered at that point.
I think we all had those mark out moments with our favorites growing up. That's interesting for me to hear that Scott Hall had such an influence on you because if I remember correctly, didn't you used to use a version of the Razor's Edge as a part of your repertoire?
Yeah, I did. I used the Razor's Edge was going to be my finish from the beginning. That was just sort of what I thought. And I think when I first debuted, I had this sit-down choke slam that I used that Earl wanted me to use because he knew, like, you're going to probably work some guys you can't give the Razor's Edge to. And then later down the road, as I'm like, no, I'm gonna get myself to where I can give it to everyone. It was that was it. I used the
fallaway slam too. I
Fallaway
thought,
slam too, yeah.
slam too.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break again.
Pause? Okay.
And yes, but when we come back, we want to hear a little bit more about your time in MCW once you made your debut, what you did here, then you left here. And so you'll fill us in and give us the recap on that period of your life. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Show your support for the MCW Cast while sporting some great gear by going to teespring.com/stores/MCWcast. You can pick up a full line of official MCW Cast merchandise, from coffee mugs and face coverings to t-shirts and sweatshirts. Visit teespring.com/stores/MCWcast. Fuel the MCW Cast by visiting buymeacoffee.com/MCWcast. And for just $3, you can buy the cast a coffee. Or you can choose to become a member of the cast for just $5 a month and get several additional perks. That's buymeacoffee.com/MCWcast.
All right, and we are back with Genesis Pat Brink. You mentioned Earl the Pearl. That's kind of who. Did we start? Did I start you? Is that who we?
Yes,
we started you guys
yeah.
like your first. Did we put you with the Holy Rollers right away?
You did. I was initially we had this debut for me by myself that was going to happen at Fort Meade, and then from the time the Fort Meade show got canceled until the Michael show, it changed to the name changed to Genesis and being with the Holy Rollers and Platinum Nat. Yeah,
wow.
I don't even remember. See, I don't remember. So many of these casts are going back. Like I don't even remember half the stuff, and I booked it.
And then
I announced that Flashback Friday. I don't remember.
And when I sat down, for I can laugh at this now, and I would laugh at this with him. Ramblin' Rich handed me the costume design, the singlet, kick pads, robe, and all that. He made like $1,000 worth of costume that he was going to make for me.
Yeah,
that
he hit you with the
I
costume.
loved it. I thought your
I loved it too.
Yeah,
it was better than anything I had on my own. You know what I mean? And it was like that gear. I still have it, and it's in better condition. I wore it than anything else I have, more than anything else I have, and it still holds up.
That's because Ramblin' Rich makes quality stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Rich's stuff was hands down. I mean, he told you that he learned how to do it from the people that made the WWE gear at the time, and it really the quality of it was just ridiculous.
Yeah, and it popped, man. I mean, you definitely stood out not only because you were so tall and you weren't very tan back there. Those days you were quite bright. I remember
super pale. Yeah. It was a struggle. I have even to this day, man. It's not. I have to work hard to stay tanned or get tanned and stay tanned. But I eventually found my niche with that.
I think one of the reasons you look so bright is because you had that light-skinned girlfriend at the time. You couldn't stand next to her. She contrasted you to look even lighter.
Yeah.
Do we have to talk about her?
I like to. I didn't say her name.
I would really prefer not to.
Her name has not been mentioned. I'm just talking about back in the
I
old days.
broke my neck. I got kind of a little heat there, So maybe we just won't talk about her.
Yeah, but let's talk about those early days though with the Holy Rollers and Platinum Nat, and were you the one who kind of got Nat out of there? Were you part of that beatdown in Harrington?
I don't even. I kind of vaguely remember that, man, because it was like
What did we turn on Nat? Or
Nat got hit.
I don't remember any.
Nat got hit in the head with a Bible, a very big Bible.
Okay,
By
I
church.
remember that. I remember church.
I was,
okay.
by then
Why
I
did
was
we get
part
rid
of
of
it.
Nat?
Nat was just leaving the business, and so
he got
The
Yeah,
girlfriend. It was
yeah,
him and his
it was
girlfriend.
booked
He got
into an
married.
angle,
Yep.
yeah.
Right.
So no, and a lot of that stuff back then became because I was like not everyone's favorite person at the time, so I was kind of I had become an afterthought. With
You
a
were
lot of the
difficult
booking. Yeah.
to get along with, though.
You know.
Do you think?
Well, I just
What do you think it was? Because we had a rough relationship.
I
me
think
and you.
that built later. I think our relationship built rough later, but I just became like early on. It went from me being everyone's guy to like all of a sudden no one liked me, and
What do you think that was?
and truthfully,
We're doing some therapy here. on the
truthfully, if we're gonna say it's that girl, we're not gonna talk about.
Well, it was-
it was a lot, and
Yeah.
a lot of guys didn't like the fact that we became an item, and it was just a lot of the guys started not liking me in general, and I was still me, and it's just I kind of fell to the wayside.
But and you know what? The truth is, like, being honest here, like, probably a lot of that was probably unfair.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of unfair things. We did
I
back
don't
in-
disagree with that.
back
I was
in the
like, what
day.
am I doing? Like I was.
Because I was doing the same thing, and
Yeah.
RJ was doing the same thing
Yeah.
with Terror.
Well-
I think, you know what I think, because I think,
I was driving the ring truck. I was the first
Here's
one.
the-
there.
That's what I think it is.
I was the last one to
I
leave.
think it was that you were kind of eclipsing. I don't want to say eclipsing,
Well,
but
there-
you were kind of the head trainer, and Bruiser was not so much. So there was kind of like this. We listened to
No.
Pat.
So here's the dynamic, and this is my opinion, and I probably say I unfairly gave heat. So like we talked about this a couple episodes with Kim on it. It's really such a weird dynamic when you get girls, because the reality is that, look, maybe it's a different time now, but back then a lot of the guys were trying to hook up with the girls. All of you girls were pretty. Then like Kim starts dating me, RJ starts dating Tara, then you got guys like, oh, they're favoring the girls, and they start giving heat. Then there's like, I'm getting mad because my girlfriend, like she was working hard. You guys were working hard, and it's like we're getting heat. So maybe, honestly, maybe it was like, oh, well, I can have heat with Pat because he's hooking up with one of the girls because I'm getting all this heat from the guys from seeing Kim. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was probably a lot of.
looking
it was
back
really
in hindsight,
stupid,
we were
and-
all kids, in
Yeah.
reality. I was a
100%.
20-year-old kid, 21-year-old kid, so like I don't harbor anything over it today. And honestly, man, we don't even need to dwell on any of it because it's such water under the bridge that the thing that I appreciated most about it was after her and I split, and it was long overdue when it finally happened, and MCW was closed down at the time. It lit a fire under me. It just lit a fire under me, and that's what pushed me to the gym and pushed me to the tanning bed and pushed me, to training to do what I needed to do. That after MCW had its moment of closing down and it opened back up, despite how everybody felt about me, everybody was looking at me and going, "Man, like we have to book him and we have to use him," And so when I look back on it in general, I don't even care anymore about what was happening because we were all in our 20s, didn't know any, most of us didn't know
Right.
anything about life. And it just, for me, it was a catalyst that
Unnecessary,
it just
it was
fueled me.
stupid.
It fueled me to really, go. And I maybe carried feelings over it for a while back then, but it was, it was neither here nor there because it helped turn me into who I became to
that
move
eventually
forward.
got signed
Yeah,
and
right.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. After we came back, Resurrection, 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And then how long was it? How long then you moved to Florida?
Yeah, I moved to Florida in January of 2008. So, it was real interesting when we came back because like, you and I were coming off of like our own little personal stuff outside of there and coming back and you were just like, hey, I want to, can we do business properly? And I was like, it would have been foolish of me to be, to not want to
Right.
come back to MCW with what it was and to, to bury everything. And, you guys let me know, like, we kind of want to do something with you. And that first show, I'm going from got to use the Baldo bomb in the past to I'm giving the Blue Meanie the razor's edge off the rope, And then, the second show back, I think I worked Josh Daniels in the semifinals, and then I went to the finals with Julio for the title in the Phenomenal Final Four show, in which Julio got the title, and then we segued into me and Bruiser, being a team and working with Bubba and Devon. And so for me, man, that time was rich. It was like educational. It was learning. It was good, man. And even throughout that time, from working so closely together, it like helped you and I form a friendship, you know what I mean, and form some of my other, friendships or for life friendships now, with the business. That time was rich, and then the, RJ and I wrestling Bubba and Devon. We had gone down to the Verizon Center. It might have even still been the MCI Center at the time, and worked as extras and things of that nature. So
when you and RJ worked the Dudleys, is that when you started talking to them?
No, actually, so we wrestled Bubba and Devon in that tag match, and then that fall, RJ and I were the tag champions, and you brought them in for a couple of shows, and I remember you wanted to book it, have them win the titles from us one night and us win them back the next, but Bubba was just like, no. He was like no, and
I was like, no, all right, So
I tried it.
But I tried it, but I did. Yeah, with Bubba.
But Bubba and Devon remembered us from that night, man, and it was cool because that match we had with them. They said to us at the time, they're like, "Hey, you guys brought it to. We don't even get guys in TNA to bring it to us the way you guys did. They were very complimentary, and you knew they didn't pay compliments,
right?
And we that it meant a lot. Now, the flip side of that is like I was full go, trying to make it. I'm like, I want to get a job, I want to get a contract, the whole nine. And I don't think RJ was really looking past, looking for that per se at that point in time. And so I had on my own, I got myself some extra bookings with the WWE. And, one was here in Baltimore, one was in New York, where me and a guy named Jason Static were in a,
I remember Jason Static.
We were in a contract signing with Booker and Batista, for Survivor Series 06. We were like these dudes, with trumpets, for the Royal contract signing.
Oh, wow.
Funny story on that is I ate a clothesline from Batista. Jason Static, was supposed to eat a body slam from Batista, and he sandbagged him on the body slam. And I mean, Batista was Batista, but when you got a 200-pound dude all muscle that doesn't, give you his part of the body slam, they ended up they cut it. They didn't air the body slam on TV. I don't think. I don't remember if they didn't air it at all or if they only aired it from him having them up. But
and
so
Jason Static was never heard from or seen again.
So
I remember him. Wow.
At that set of bookings, is where I met Shad Gaspard, and me and Shad had become friends. At that point in time, I was looking to move.
Was he not signed then or no?
No, he had just debuted. Prime Time had just, they were 5 or 6 weeks on television, and so we were looking to, I was looking to move to OVW at the first of the year because that's just kind of where everyone went. Yeah, what everyone did at the time. Well, at that point in time, so I do those bookings right before Survivor Series. I go home, I come to my family's house for Thanksgiving, and my stepfather is like, basically super sick from pancreas cancer. And we recognize like he's not going to make it. And so, I was initially in contact with Shad about going to Louisville, and he was going to help me do it, help me get my foot in the door where I needed to get my foot in down there. But I just kind of put the whole thing on pause. Because I knew my father's days were numbered. And so he wound up passing away in March of 2007. And I just kind of at that point in time, I had it on hold. And we had this angle set up where I was going to team with Bubba and Devon. They were coming back. Me and RJ were now split. And I was going to team with Bubba and Devon to work RJ, Tom Brandy, and Cicero. And that was when I found out about Bubba and Devon's school. There was already a built-in thing there, and and it wasn't going to be oversaturated. And I believe that was when the rumblings started talking that WWE was going to move their entire developmental system to Florida anyway. So it wound up, being the end of the year when I did that.
So when was that?
That was 07.
Man, has the WWE been in Florida that long?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think they opened at the very early 2007. Yeah. Wow. And it was I think it took till the end of 07. I think it took until they opened up in the summer of 07. There was rumblings about it then. They opened in the summer, and it was by the early January of 08 they had the whole system down there. So, but there was actually while we're here talking about it, that show where I teamed with Bubba and Devon on, that was actually the show that Zachary Shane and Kim came back to, and I don't know how much you guys remember that.
Well, that's a good topic
yeah.
to bring up because it came up. It came
When
up
we had Kim
when we had Kim
and Nicole
on
on.
here.
Yeah,
And I'm glad we can talk about this because there's definitely a different perspective.
Oh
here.
my gosh, yeah. So, I'm not saying that Kim doesn't remember things the way she remembers them, but like that version that she gave on the podcast was completely not what happened. You know what I mean? Like that's not what went down at all. The first thing, is, and I have no problem saying this.
Okay, I remember now.
She referred. So basically, I'm going to go back and I'm going to give the whole thing. First thing
You
she did,
punched Zach right in the face when he came?
I did not punch Zach. I smacked Zach, but there's more to it than that. She referred to me as Dan's stooge at the time, which was completely unfair. Dan and I had become friends, but like it was in no way, shape, or form was it fair for her to call me his stooge because, quite frankly, Dan was the only one in the locker room that was against that happening. He didn't want it to happen. I remember this plain as day, but it was like literally everyone. If it wasn't me, it was going to be someone else.
Well, there's context that matters too before you go into.
Oh, there's
it.
a whole lot.
A whole lot of context that matters that Kim conveniently doesn't mention, and that context is that the animosity of everybody not wanting to do that was because she was real shady about how it happened. Because she was asking me to help Zach and get in.
Oh,
and they had something going on.
I'm going to go back even further on that.
Right. So everybody was real insulted about like, hey, Kim was asking Dan to help train this kid.
Yeah.
And help him get. Meanwhile, they're still married.
And she's doing her.
Yeah.
She's with him. Right. So like there was a lot of animosity and a lot of people didn't like that were looking out for me were like, and fairly speaking, look, I was in love with Kim. She was my wife.
Of course.
Obviously, we had been together 9 years. There was probably a part of me that was holding on to maybe we can still work things out, even though people are going like, come on. You know what I mean? Like but so maybe I was bringing them back in. I mean, I was doing it because I did want to do a match, but I think a lot of people, and I remember RJ too at the time, like, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, I don't think
you may not even know half of what I'm about to, give you on that. So here's your timeline. Zach, I met Zach at a show in Pennsylvania somewhere, in like March or April of 2006. And I was literally asked by the promoter to just do a run-in on his match and beat him and the guy who was working up. And I was like, are you kidding? Like, on the fly? I was like, can these kids work? And he was like, yeah, I want you to do it right now. I forgot to tell you before the show started. So I run to the ring, and I beat Zach and this guy up, and they do like a pretty decent job with it. So then a couple months later, Zach is at the MCW show wanting to help out. And, he's just helping out, trying to get himself noticed. You guys needed a couple of guys for me and RJ to squash. This is like post-Dudley thing. I'm like, that guy can do it. I don't even remember who the second guy was, but I knew I personally was like, Zach is the guy to do it. Then you and I were talking because you and Kim were having issues, but as far as the boys know, you and Kim were married, you were together. You were telling me
only a few people knew we were really separated.
Of course, but all the boys thought y'all were together, but we knew some of us knew you were having issues, So
we were still husband and wife.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, you were still man and wife.
So you're you started training Zach as a means to help her, and all of a sudden Zach is now also, because you admittedly were looking to try to piece things together with you and her. Zach is getting opportunities that he's like that he shouldn't have gotten. He was at this Legends convention with us, getting paraded around, with like got to have
Paul
lunch with Paul
Bear,
and
right.
Like he was one of us. And
Sensational Sherry.
And I remember becoming sort of offended by it, but I'm like, whatever, like it doesn't affect me. So
because people were like, hey man, I think something's more going on with Kim and Zach, and I didn't want to see it because I'm like, no, she said no.
So I told Dean, I said, listen, man, you got to latch Tyler Hilton. I said, you got to latch yourself on to Zach because he's going to get a push one way or another. And like Dean was kind of Tyler was floating on the mid card, and he was like, I don't want to. I was like, listen. So I came up with the idea to put him, Zach, and LK together, and then like I kind of came up with the beginning phases of it, and then they took hold of it and became the Rehoboth Beach Crew. And I told Tyler, I said, listen, man, you can work, you're gonna outshine them, which he he did. And 2 months into the gimmick, he's the TV champion. Then stuff comes out, Zach, about Zach and Kim. And what really frustrated me when it came out was I know there was an incident when they were loading the ring in your garage back then where Tyler and some of the other guys confronted Zach about him and Kim and said, this is basically your opportunity to come clean. And he lied about it. So when the whole thing went down, I reached out to Zach and I said, here's the deal, man. You disrespected the entire locker room. You disrespected the business. Like, this is about what you did to Dan, especially with everything he was doing for you, but it's about what you did to every single one of us. Like, getting opportunities that should have been going to someone else. Like, you really, like, if I see you again, I said, and I sent this to him, I think, in a MySpace message because I didn't have his number. I said, the next time I see you, I don't care if it's a day from now or it's 6 months from now or a year from now, I'm going to slap you right across your face. And you can do with that whatever you want. And so there was no response from him. So that night, they brought them in through the front door. We had talked about it the kind of the night before at your house, I think, and Bubba and Devon were present for that. And Bubba was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." He was like, "I can't believe you're bringing that kid back in the locker room." So we get to the show the next day, and what no one knows, like the whole entire locker room was in on it. Like everyone was like, RJ and Tyler, they had guys like staged at the curtains to make
RJ,
sure.
I found, and again, I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I was busy with the show.
I was announcing.
I knew that.
All of it.
So I really didn't.
Yeah.
And as you guys, but RJ was one of the guys policing it.
So they
right?
we all knew. I told him what I'm going to do. I said, I'm going to slap him, and I want you guys to I'm going to give him a minute to respond. If he wants to do something, that's up to him. And so he came down the steps, and, I said, hey, what's up, Zach?
After we did the angle.
Yeah, after he did the angle in the ring, he came down the steps, and I said, hey, what's up, Zach? And as soon as he did that, I slapped him across the face. He fell back on the steps. He did get a black eye, but it was a slap. It was not a punch.
And Kim went off.
And well, she kind of did, but they let it breathe for a second. And then, we did that. We did what we had already talked about where RJ kind of come and grab me, and we pretended to have them take me back. And,
But RJ was in on it.
RJ, the whole locker room was in on it. We had like 5 guys at the curtains to make sure we didn't spill through the curtain into the crowd if we had a fight,
Right.
And so, but it was like all the boys, Dope, everyone was in on it. And then, it got me over with Bubba and Devon because Bubba was just kind of like, that was old school, and Bubba even tried to pump me up beforehand, like telling me, you're not going to do it. And this, I was like, hey, I got all the respect in the world for you, but I don't need that. This is happening. This is happening. And so, but to Zach's credit, following that, Zach ate everything he had to eat to deal with it, to deal with the repercussions. Later in that same show, he had to smack me in the ring as part of a thing. And Kim's standing right there telling him to slap me. And I looked right at him in the ring and I was like, I dare you. And he gave me like the weakest slap, the weakest pro wrestling slap in history. And then, he was
afraid.
The following show, I think it was the Shamrock Cup where I worked RJ in the street fight. Zach was gonna I was sizing up RJ to hit him with a chair, and Zach popped up on the apron, and I turned and creamed him with the chair. And to me it was over after that. And man, he took like the sickest bump to the floor that anybody could have expected to take. So it was, it was dead and done after that. And Zach was a part of MCW for years after that. So, but you gotta, if you're going to do that, you're going to do something like sleep with the owner's wife, the guy who trained most of us wife, the guy who, is responsible for the show running and is having his own go with it. You're spitting in our faces too, man. And like, and it's his wife. It's what he had devoted his life to. He's not, no one expected you to want to make that decision right now, but we were like, dude, this is our locker room, and me being the guy that RJ was always the man, but I was sort of the guy because I hadn't made a solid decision to leave yet, and at that point, the best I knew, I was the next MCW Heavyweight Champion, down the line from Joey, and I was like, I'm the guy that's gonna do it. Well, I already told him I'm gonna do it, so I got to be the guy to do it,
Wow.
So.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I missed all
So there was
of
a
that.
lot more context.
Yeah, and it wasn't the way that Kim made it out that you
No.
just stood back there, sucker punched him the second he walked down the stairs.
We made eye contact. I said,
He
hey,
knew it
what's
was
up?
coming.
I said, hey, what's up, Zach? And it was like a second pause, and then I did it, and then I even let it breathe when he came up off the steps to see, are you gonna I was gonna give him an opportunity to do something back,
He was just ready to take another one.
It's weird, man, because I'm obviously, like what Kim said, I'm a different guy in life now. And, so I look back on that now and I'm like, would the guy that I am now do that? maybe not, because it's such a flagrant, egregious like offense. But I most certainly wouldn't have stopped the guy from doing it that I knew was going to do it. You know.
I heard that. Well, with that said, I think it's time for us to take another little pause because that was a little too hot for the cast even.
Yeah, and then we'll get back.
We're
We'll
gonna
get
let
into
that
him
simmer for a
moving
second.
down to the Dudleys and then getting signed
Yeah.
after that. So
We'll be right back.
Be right back.
We hope you're enjoying this week's episode of the MCW Cast. At MCW Pro Wrestling, much like many small businesses throughout the country, the pandemic has presented many challenges. For a company like ours that hosts events with live audiences, the impact has been even more severe, and all of our forms of revenue have been cut off. In order to continue to engage with our fans on a regular basis, we made the decision to begin to produce the MCW Cast and are providing it for absolutely no cost on Facebook Live, Twitch, YouTube, and SoundCloud. If you'd like to support us during these challenging times, you can do so in several ways. The most popular way is to buy us a coffee to help fuel the cast. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/MCWcast, and for just $3, you can buy the cast a coffee, or you can choose to become a member of the cast for just $5 a month and receive several special perks. That's buymeacoffee.com/MCWcast. You can also contribute directly on Cash App, MCW Wrestling, or on Venmo, MCW-Wrestling. You can also show your support for the MCW Cast while sporting some great gear by going to teespring.com/stores/MCWcast to pick up a full line of official MCW Cast merchandise, from coffee mugs and face coverings to t-shirts and sweatshirts. Also, don't forget to comment in the threads on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch to get your questions answered on a future episode. And you can also send us a tweet using the hashtag AskMCWCast. Thank you for your support, and now, back to the show.
All right, well, we are back. That definitely shed some light on what was a somewhat controversial moment in our mid-MCW history back in, 2007?
2006, 2007, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
All right. So, well, that also was the period right before you left MCW.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the catalyst there for that?
So during that, that time, I was, I count my blessings to this day that I was, given the opportunities to work with the Dudleys, the whole nine. It forged, and Bubba and Devon had launched their own school. And I knew, I needed some advanced training from somebody on that level to some degree. That's why, I was previously saying I wanted to move to OVW, even though I knew it would be oversaturated. I'm like, even if I don't go down there and get a contract, I'm going to get better. And so, but I learned at that show we talked about that, Bubba and Devon had opened up their school down in Kissimmee, and I just made the decision of man, that's going to be the place. And I went down there in September of 2007. Actually, I went down there on my 27th birthday because Bubba wanted to evaluate me. And I'm like, man, you guys worked me. And he is like, I don't care. I need to see what you really can do and can't do. And so they brought me down, and they did this evaluation. They used, if you guys remember, Jesse Neal from TNA. He was one of their students, and he was their, one of their top students at the time.
Oh yeah.
And me and Jesse for 45 minutes, Jesse just blew me up. It was bad, And so I realized that in that day, in that moment, that's the place I want to go. But I've been given too much attention to being a bodybuilder and not enough to being an athlete. And so it was a good mindset shift as we move forward. And then first weekend in January of 2008, I packed up and moved down. And what was really interesting about that was Booker T had recently opened up his school at that point in time too. And they were Booker T was creating this cross school, beef for the shows with them. And because they didn't necessarily have a student that was per se ready, Bubba called me a week before I moved down, and they got me booked to go to Houston to be their student on this show. And
to be one of Booker's students?
To be one of Bubba and Devon's student to work with, Booker.
Oh, I remember. I kind of remember that, yeah.
And it was and then so I immediately walked into Bubba and Devon's school with all this heat from all these kids because I hadn't even trained one day. And I trained my first week, but they had already had it booked when I got there
right
before we went. And it ended up working out. I was just supposed to go to the show and be a part of it. Well, Bubba's father-in-law at the time, who was our strength and conditioning coach, he got real sick. I think he had a stroke or something along those lines. He was in the hospital. Bubba couldn't go. So then I got to go to Houston and team with Devon to work a couple of Booker students, and it was like, just kind of like all systems go from there, man. It ended with like me and Devon putting those guys through tables and running in a limo, hopping in a limo. And it's like, man, as much as the business, is a work, that stuff was still, it was exhilarating, man.
Yeah. Of course.
And,
Yeah.
To get those spots like that.
to be treated so well, to fly in and to be treated so well by Booker and Charmel, man, like as just a student being put up in my own room in the Marriott with a gift basket and a note wishing me well in my career, man, it was like,
wow.
It was like immediately, like right out the gate from going down there, I was like, man, like, okay, I'm supposed to be here, and the program itself, it was a full-fledged. Bubba's father-in-law was a co-creator of the original American Gladiators, and so he was our strength and conditioning coach. And so, man, it was rigorous, but man, I dropped like 40 pounds, I think, while I was down there from the moment I walked in the door, till I had my tryout post WrestleMania 24. It was just it was insane, man.
So you got signed.
Mm-hmm.
From when you were, how long were you down there with Bubba and Devon before you got signed?
So
by WWE?
I started training there the second week in January, and I'm not going to say that this wasn't a motivating factor. Was that WrestleMania 24 was in Orlando, and it was like the end of March. So basically, it was like 10 weeks, and Bubba came to me maybe 2 weeks ahead of time and told me I was going to be, I was going to be at the Raw after WrestleMania 24. That was it. That's all it was booked. Then a week beforehand, they came to me and told me that I was going to WrestleMania and that I was probably going to get chokeslammed by the Big Show. They were going to put me in Mayweather's posse and have me be the guy that got chokeslammed by Big Show because they didn't want to exploit any of the developmental talent. And then like a couple days beforehand, they just scrapped it all together and they pulled some guys from FCW and had those guys be, with Floyd Mayweather. But then I went to the Raw, following WrestleMania, and it was good because everybody was burnt out. So like I got in the ring and I rolled around with Jamie Noble for like 45 minutes. And that was a cool experience because I knew at that point in time all that training at Bubba and Devon's was like it was the best shape I've ever been in my entire life. Like you couldn't blow me up, to the point that 45 minutes in, Jamie Noble was like, "Do you need you need to take a break? You need water?" And he could go, he was still Jamie Noble, but he was like, and I was like, "No, man, I'm good." And he was like, "Well, I need water. Take a powder." So from there, and that was actually what was cool for me about that was actually Ric Flair's retirement Raw, and like
that was Shawn Michaels. Ric Flair, that was
it was the right. Raw. The Raw was the night after.
But that was that Wrestle.
Yeah, so I was. Yep.
I'm sorry, I love you.
Yeah.
Iconic moment there.
Yeah.
Yep. And so I was like at that Raw, and it was cool because a lot of the extras, man, guys that get work for WWE as an extras that just have no etiquette or training. It was the end of the night. It's the Ric Flair retirement Raw, and these guys are like gone. Because they're not getting looked at anymore. Nobody's paying attention to them, and so they just left. I was literally standing backstage, like 5 feet from Gorilla, watching the screen back there. And because the whole entire WWE, everyone was out around the ring. I was the only one in the locker room, I almost walked out just to like...
Right, you should have
You
should have just walked out and hugged him after Undertaker or something.
I know.
So,
Triple H looks this guy.
Well, they were all up in the ring. Everybody else was like on the stage.
Yeah.
So I was like, I could have slipped through there and like hung out on the stage, But that
Had your WrestleMania.
you would have got heat for that from someone.
That Raw, it actually went really well. It was also what was great about that was that particular Raw was Crime Time's re-debut after being released. And so, I hadn't spoken to Shad since I had started at Bubba and Devon's. He knew I was moving, but they were like doing indies everywhere because they had kind of gotten a bogus release.
Right.
And then they were back, and so we kind of ran into each other while we were filling. They were literally signing their contracts, and I was like filling out my extra paperwork. We ran into each other, and so it was just a lot that happened that day, man. That was like, really cool. And at 12:30 midnight when everybody's wrapping up, Ty Bailey came to me, and he's Ty Bailey used to work directly under John Laurinaitis, and he's like, hey, he was like, can you go to SmackDown tomorrow? And it was in Miami, and I was like, absolutely. He was like, okay, go there, you'll get further things from there, or further instructions from there. So I went to Miami was like 4 hours away, and like after getting that news and after being a part of it, I like couldn't sleep. So I literally got in my car and drove to Miami, and I got down to Miami. I think I went home first and like took a shower and all that. But I got down to Miami at like 7:30 in the morning, and I didn't have to be to the building till like 1 o'clock to 1:30. So I just kind of had to hang out around local places down there, and right outside that arena down there, it was pretty rough. So I had to like pick and choose and be careful where I went. So I went to SmackDown, and we did a little bit of stuff in the ring. That was the night Vladimir Kozlov debuted, and originally they were going to have me get beat by him, and they were like, no. And then Snitsky had a match on Sunday Night Heat, and they were doing this thing where they got to kind of pick their enhancement guy that they worked with. And so Kozlov worked Matt Bentley on SmackDown, but for Sunday Night Heat they got to pick their guy. And I literally, Snitsky I don't think he knew I heard him at the time, but I literally heard him tell Jamie Noble that he was not picking me to work me. And Noble was like, well, the office is looking at him. And he was like, I don't care. I'm not having him stand next to me because of how good he looks. And, so it was, I'm not going to say it swelled my head. It just gave me like, okay, I belong here. Mm-hmm. I was feeling it already, but I was like, I belong here. Yeah. And so he ended up picking this other guy, and then they sent me down to FCW for a week-long tryout the following week. Well, it was like this weird time in my life, man, because that Friday, a friend of mine passed away, that I worked with from back in Maryland. And I had to, went down to FCW the next week, did my tryout. Everything went great with that. I still to this day, there was, I would say not even half the roster did as well as I was able to do during that tryout, because it was just, I was prepared. And so I did that tryout. Steve Kern flat told me, I worked Matt Bentley in what we filmed tryout matches for that. And it was funny because Yoshitatsu was there at the time trying out he was here from Japan. And Billy Kidman was one of the trainers, and Kidman did his tryout match with him. I worked Matt Bentley in mine. And the guys were like real, good to me. And Steve Kern pulled me in his office, and he said, I'm going to push to get you signed. And he was like, I can't guarantee you anything. And so this was like the first week of April. And so, first or second week of April. And then so at the end of April, my sister passed away. And that, that in and of itself, I could give an hour to, and just how much it wrecked me emotionally, and what it did to my state of mind. And then like a month later, 30 days later, I'm still trying to contact the WWF. It's radio silent from them. Like I do this tryout, they tell me they're going to push me to get signed, and then I get no feedback. I get nothing, and they're like, we're gonna push to get you signed. They don't answer emails, don't answer phone calls, nothing. And I'm like, man, what am I doing? And in the meantime, after my sister passed away, I went into a bit of a depression where I'm like, I'm drinking, I'm like, eating, I'm not going to the gym. I'm like, man, I think this contract, if I get this contract, it'll save me, but I ain't even prepared to get this contract, Right. And so June, I think it was like the second week of June, I finally get a phone call. Like, because I was in touch with Bubba, and Bubba's kind of like, you need to get back down here and start training.
You would come back to Maryland.
Yeah, I was back in Maryland because I was back, like it timed out to where I went down to Florida, and I had an exact amount of money and an exact timeline. And I was like, if I don't get a tryout post WrestleMania, at WrestleMania or Raw, then I'm gonna get a job down here. But when I did those tryouts and they went as well as they did, I'm like, I'm not spending any more money to be down. I'm gonna get back home. But then it was like my sister passed away. That was really the thing that kind of pushed me home.
Right.
And so, I'm in Maryland. Bubba's like, you need to get back down here, start training. Then I get this phone call to get signed. And so, I get the phone call to get signed. A couple weeks later, another friend of mine passed away. A month later, my grandmother passed away. So it's like I'm going through this process of where I'm expecting to be like the greatest time in my life, man. There's people horrible, right? Just dropping dead. I mean, I have a tattoo on my forearm for 2008 in Roman numerals because there were 6 people that passed away, and there's 6 letters. And it was just rough. And then, I kind of got the phone call to get signed. And, you know, up until the day I reported at FCW, man, I was like not expecting to even make it myself. It was like, the days just kind of all blurred. You know, I didn't know what was real and what wasn't. And then I walked into FCW the first day, and I went from being, 245 pounds and shredded and like, ready for TV already, to walking in that door like 310 pounds, hadn't been to the gym in 4 months. And I walked right up to Tom Pritchard, Steve Kerr, and I said, hey, man, like, here's where I've been. Here's where I am. I have no excuse, but this is just what happened in my life. I didn't expect to really walk in these doors till I just did. And, Steve Kern looked right at me and, he asked me, what I believed about God and things of that nature. We had a conversation about faith. And he said, well, you just got to let your actions speak for your words. And so I kind of got to work. And I went from like being this close to getting cut, because when you get down there your first day, they take pictures, and they had pictures of me from when I tried out, so it immediately was this like, what happened to this guy? Yeah, what happened to this guy? What was he doing before he got here, that he can't do now? And so it just, I had to work and get myself back into shape, man. But it was like I was really close to getting fired. And, it was embarrassing. I had a match with Trent Barreto. It was like my first match there. And I still have a picture to this day I'll go back and look at, man, where my stomach was like spilt over, my waist, where he's coming off the top rope to drop kick me. And it was, it just wasn't a good time. But, slowly but surely I made progress, started getting myself together, got back in 10 weeks. I had basically dropped all the weight I needed to drop, and at that point in time, there were so many guys there that like, you get a lot of, the business can sometimes get a bad rap for how, bad guys are, but there's so many good guys in the business too. And there were a lot of good guys that, came along me and knew like, hey, here's some nutrition tips. I already knew what I needed to do in the gym. And like, here's a way to cut weight fast, but not like starve yourself kind of thing. And, I just went through the process, and about 10 weeks later I was in shape and I was in everyone's good graces. I was getting drug tested twice a week, but I was in everyone's good graces, so.
So that when you were down there and you were trying to go through this whole process, did you have any real, obviously Bubba was a big advocate of yours. Did you have any other advocates that were really like in your corner? And in addition to that, did you have any detractors that were kind of like, you felt like trying to knock you off the rails or kind of take some of the wind out of your sails? You
mean as far as when I was trying to get signed, or once I was there?
Once you got there.
Once you got there.
Once I got there, I'm sure everybody, because people are competitive, and once it sort of became known, so like I was good friends with Shad, and Shad was like one of those people that like he would do anything for anybody, right? And so a lot of people didn't like him, and so once it became like, hey, this is Shad's boy, there were certain guys.
Residual.
There were certain guys, and I'm not going to say their names because it's really not important, because they're all different people now too, that were kind of like, didn't want anything to do with me when I got there. And but slowly but surely it all changed.
I'd love to hear some of their names, Pat. I'm just saying.
No, man, I won't do that because they're good people now, and it's just I'm not a gossip. It'd be gossipy, man, and that's not good.
You were signed there twice.
Yes.
So you got released.
Yep. So
and came back because like your Biggie and all that, you were tag champ.
That was the second go round.
That's what I couldn't. Yep. Okay, so you. How long were you there when you got released?
So the first go round I was there for about 9 months, and so I get I lose all this weight, I get in shape, they start doing this push, they line me up in this group with like Wade Barrett and I think Drew was still slightly a part of it, and Byron Saxton. We were called the Conglomerate, and Dusty was big on me. We're doing this. I started coining this Baltimore character of.
Were you given the name Calvin Reigns at that time?
At that point, no. I had the name Kaleb O'Neal at
that
time.
That's right. That was right.
And truthfully, I picked the name Kaleb from the girl that was my ex-girlfriend at the time, because she always said she was going to name her first son that. Mm-hmm. So I picked the name Kaleb just to sort of spite her, and then I just chose O'Neal because it was 2 syllables, and it was like you could be like O'Neal or O'Neal sucks, one of the two. Mm-hmm. And that was a name I had then. And so I was doing well. Dusty and I had sort of worked together. I coined this like, gimmick being from Baltimore, and, putting myself up there with like Michael Phelps and Ray Lewis and Cal Ripken and all these great athletes. And I remember I cut this promo one time calling all the girls down there flea bitten floozies compared to like the greatest diva, Stacy Keibler, and kind of thing. And that got cut off. Dusty was like, "You can't call my girls floozies." He didn't care that I said flea bitten. He said, "You can't call them floozies." So what happened is it was basically, there's a bunch of us, like I got injured. On a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I strained my quad, and I was looking at like a 4-week rehab. Well, I went to physical therapy. It was a Friday morning. I went to physical therapy, or it was a Thursday or Friday. Anyway, I was driving to physical therapy, and when I was coming down the road to go to the appointment, the exit that you needed to take was closed for construction. And at that point, I was still 20 minutes away from the appointment. I was still 20 minutes away from my time. Well, there's this bridge down there called the Gandy Bridge that runs from Tampa to St. Pete. Well, this was the last exit before the Gandy Bridge. It was like 8 miles long. And when you go across the Gandy Bridge, you can't just get off and get back on and come back across. So basically, when I got off, I called the place, was like, "Hey, I'm going to be a few minutes late. I'm sorry. This is what happened." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, we got to start telling people not to use that exit." So I get to the appointment 10 minutes late. I do the appointment. Everything's fine. And then, the next day, I get a phone call, and it's like Ty Bailey and John Laurinaitis both, and they're just kind of ripping into me, right? Like, about who do I think I am being late to my physical therapy appointment? And I was like, what? And they were like, "Why were you late?" And I tried to explain it to him, and John was like, "That sounds like a bunch of excuses." And, he started ripping into me, and I quickly realized there was something bigger, happening in the conversation. And so I kind of, I had gone through where I had gotten some tattoos a couple months prior, and I got suspended because I didn't wait for permission. And I will stand on my own to this day. I tried to get permission. They didn't respond in a timely fashion. And I'm like, I'm a grown man. I'm going to get my tattoos. Like, I already have tattoos. I'm just adding to what I have. So, but that got me suspended. But John told me in that moment, if you weren't 6'5", 250 and could work, and I knew I was going to make money on you, I would fire you right now. So it was like, suck to get suspended when you're making $500 a week and get fined $1,000, that you're trying to live off of.
Right.
And to, that, so we had that. So now this like physical therapy appointment, but it just didn't make sense to me. He's ripping me, and he's like scrutinizing like things. He's like, "Why aren't you the last person to leave practice every day?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm like one of the first people there, and I spend more time in the ring when I'm there than anyone else." And he was like, "Why aren't you the last?" And he was like, "I work 20 hours a day sometimes." And I remember saying this to him, and this is like the one thing I regret. I said, "Well, John, you make $3 million a year. I make $26,000 a year. When I'm earning your kind of money, I'll put in your kind of time."
No, hell yeah! I'm glad you said that to John Laurinaitis.
Oh man, no, yes and no, because no matter how right it may have felt at the time, that was my boss I was talking to, and I failed to realize like there was a bigger purpose for the phone call, And so
was that the release?
Oh yeah, he said, "Well, I'm gonna tell you what." He was like, "I'm gonna go ahead and let you go." Then he was like, "You go to Japan, you go to TNA, you go wherever." He said, "I'll call you in 6 months when when you're as valuable to me as you think you are." And I found out in that moment, like, wow, like you're not as special as you thought you were because you just got fired. But then I turned into that guy that was like, "Man, forget this place." I called Bubba. I was like, "Get me into TNA," kind of thing. Yeah. Right. And it just didn't, but it shocked them. The guys, like everyone down there was shocked. So what happened is I left and I went to physical therapy because I had physical therapy that day. And when I got to physical therapy, I walked in and I got to that appointment on time. And when I walked in, they're like, "Hey, how you doing?" And Evan Bourne, Matt Seidel, and Ryback were in there. And I was like, and they were like, and I was like, "Well, I just got fired." And they were like, "For what?" They were like, and I was like, "For being late to physical therapy yesterday." And they were like, "Are you kidding me?" And Matt Seidel, Evan Bourne, he like his head dropped and he was like, "Dude, I'm so sorry." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Man," he was like, it's probably my fault." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "I tried to cancel my appointment today because he was like to go fishing." It's like literally my last appointment. I think he had a heel injury or an Achilles injury or something he was coming back from. He was like, "It was my last appointment before being cleared from here." He said, "I just wanted to go fishing before I go back on the road." And so the doctor came over at that point, or the therapist, and he heard us talking, and he was like, "Dude, I'm sorry." He said, basically I have to give them a report every day. And he said, Ryback, they had kept at the arena till like 3 a.m. doing promos. And he had a 7 a.m. physical therapy appointment that he overslept and missed. And so between when they called the office to be like, hey, basically Ryback didn't show up, and Matt, told us he's not coming. And so they asked for the attendance report for like the entire week from everybody. And they just plucked my name off the list. I was later told that John said when he gets that list, he's going to pluck somebody off and fire them that nobody expects to be fired. Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
I bet it is true, Pat.
So that was the end of the first run there.
Wow. Well, we've heard those stories about what it's like to work for the E and work for, personalities like Mark Carano recently, which has happened with Mickey and John Laurinaitis. We've heard a lot of stories about too, so I don't want to delve into too much, but Tara?
But, that wasn't your only stint with them, though,
No, and what was really cool about that was actually while I was in FCW, I had met Batista. I worked out in the gym where he worked out in. And he actually kind of tried to get me my job back after I was let go. And he was just like, this is bull crap, man. Like, who cares? And they're looking at it as you came in here overweight, you got tattoos, and now you're this. And he's like, man, it's all just bull crap, man. He was like, it's ridiculous that they fired you. So he said he went down to FCW and he talked to Steve Kern to make sure I wasn't a turd. And, he said, once I found out you weren't a turd, he said he tried to go to bat for me, but just from a political aspect, he later came back and said, it's just better for you to wait it out. Let John hire you back on his own terms. So
how long was it?
A year and a half. John was telling everyone 6 months. It was a year and a half. And so once I realized I immediately went back to Bubba and Devon's and I started training.
Did you come back to MCW after that?
Yeah. Well, the first 3 months, because they paid me for 90 days. And so for those first 3 months, I just went to Bubba and Devon's trying to kind of rationalize. And Bubba was very adamant of like, I don't want to bring you to TNA, And so, I was like, at that point, it's the first time I had to really like exhale and decompress from like everyone that had passed away and from that whole process. And I was just like, I'm going home, I'm going to go home. Maybe I'll do some indies, go back to MCW, try to get in the Ring of Honor, the whole nine. And, I kind of came home for that. Came back to MCW, I think this is when I won, would end up winning the MCW heavyweight title. During that time in my personal life was when I met my wife.
What year was that?
This was 2009. 2009 and late 2009, early 2010. And during that time I was in like steady touch with like Shad, and I even talked to Dave a little bit here and there up until he left the company in May. I think it was May of 2010. And but I met my wife and basically went from being this like single guy that you should hide your wife and hide your kids from to now I've got a girlfriend and she's got 3 sons and I'm not supposed to even meet her kids for like 6 months, and then it was the year we got all the blizzards. Like we wait. They're calling for 30 inches of snow. You're like, we're not really going to get 30 inches of snow. And then I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to try and leave, and there's 30 inches of snow on the ground. And it's like, you're meeting the kids.
Side note from before you met your wife, and you're talking about the kind of guy you were. Do you remember being at my uncle's?
Yeah, and
pool party, and it was all these.
So I know what you're going to say. Brian Holhouse loves to tell this story to this day. Brian Holhouse will tell this story to anybody that will listen of me standing near the edge of the pool. See, I had to work that night, so I had clothes in the car, and I was like, I need one of you guys. There was like, there's a bunch of women there, and I was like, I need you guys to push me in the pool, and they were like, why? I was like, so I have a reason to take my clothes off out here.
In front of all these.
I'm not going to lie. I'm ashamed of that now not for the it's like, man, that was so cheap,
It was, but it was so cheap. I couldn't forget it. I was like, and then he gets up, and it was totally out of, because Pat was in shape and he was shredded and jacked. Yeah. So it was like the cheapest like Fabio commercial ever, like him getting up and slowly taking his shirt off out of the swimming pool.
Like
but
the both hands
a lot of my uncle and aunt's women friends sold big for it.
Yeah, it was
sold big for it. It was the cheesiest 80s Fabio commercial ever, and it happened right in my uncle's backyard.
I remember setting my cell phone down, and I was like, setting my cell phone and my wallet on the table. I was like, it's go time. And the good thing about these stories. I'm thankful. I'm very thankful that my wife kind of already knows who I was before we got together, before I found, my relationship with God and all that. So it's not like she gets caught. She's heard all these stories. She didn't get caught off guard by this, but it was funny, man. It was
funny.
I laughed about that actually, I still laugh about it with Whole House to this day.
Yeah.
So that's great.
So now you meet your wife to be, and you're here again, but now you're going to go back.
Well, so I'm wrestling for MCW, and I'm doing my thing. I'm kind of staying in shape, but I'm kind of not. It's like, okay, well, MCW. I decided not to chase a bunch of independents because it's like I just don't want to put the mileage on my body right now. If I legitimately have a shot to get signed back by WWE or to go to TNA, I don't want to go take a bunch of bumps somewhere else with guys that I don't know to run your bump card up. And so, and then I got snowed in. We got 30 inches of snow. So I'm now playing house with my now wife and my sons. And, and it just went really well. It was like, it was such a rich time for me, as a person, as a man, as who I was. And so 4 days later, we get 18 more inches. So I ended up spending 11 straight days with them, out in the snow playing and kind of realizing man, this is what life can be and should be and all that. And I just fall in love with my wife. I fell in love with all of them, and it was this just amazing time. But, I knew this is temporary, so, I started having, we ran through all the snow and I started, kind of working out again. And I began, talking with Bubba about going to TNA because at this point, WWE is not calling me, you know? And so Bubba's like, well, I want you to come back to the school. He was like, because I can't vouch for you. And he says, I can't vouch for you to come to a tryout when I have students at my school. And quite frankly, if I don't have daily eyes on you, how do I know what you're doing? So I packed up again first week of May 2010 and just went back down. And so I just kind of traveled back and I would go down there and stay. And trained at the school, trained at the gym, and then I came home, worked on I think it was the Shamrock Cup, and but during that time, I got back, I got back into shape. I was ready to go, and I was this is it. And I called Dan. I was MCW Heavyweight Champion at the time, and there was no plan at that point for me to necessarily lose the title. But I had come to the conclusion, man, I knew I was getting ready to have a bunch of meetings with TNA, and I was just if nothing comes from this, I'm just done. I've got this amazing woman and these kids back home that they have their life on hold for me right now. And I've got to earn a living doing this, or I got to or this just has to be it, man. I'm not going to chase this anymore. Once you get past all the BS and the politics and you decide it really should be I should be earning a living doing this, or I should not be doing this at all. And I called Dan and I said, I'm not going to say I'm quitting the business, and because I know everyone says that and then they don't, but I feel if nothing pans out, I need to take a break. And, I remember Dan saying to me, it's good that you see it that way, because you're everyone says they're quitting, but everyone ends up back.
Right.
And,
then did you drop the title?
Yeah. So,
to McBride,
to Ryan McBride. So we pitched, I pitched it to you. It was actually me that pitched it to drop the title to Ryan in the first match. And then and then Christian York was coming back. He won the cup that night in the final match. And, me and Ryan that was my favorite match of all time to this day that me and Ryan had that night. And then it was
off to the races.
Yeah, well, I'm expecting I dropped the title to Ryan. I'm thinking a week and a half from now I'm having meetings with TNA. Tommy Dreamer was at that show with Ryan, and Dreamer was like, what's going on with you? He was in TNA, and he was like, how are you not on Raw right now? And I said, I don't know, man. And he was like, what's your plans? I told him, and he's like, you don't want to go to TNA. That's what he said. And he was there, and 4 days later, I got a call from WWE asking me if I wanted to go back to FCW, and so that was that.
And then that's when you teamed with Big E. You were FCW Tag Team Champions.
Yeah, so I was actually there for about 6 or 7 months at that point, and we were kind of wallowing. And it was actually originally supposed to be me and Connor O'Brien that were the FCW Tag Team Champions. Connor was injured, and so it became Big E. And me and Big E had about a 3 or 4 month run as the FCW Tag Team Champions.
Right.
And he was new. He was super new to the business at the time, and he was you know, he was fairly green, but you just knew the dude had star all over him, man. You know.
And then, so after that, then how long were you down before?
So all total, I was there from September of 2010 until January of 2012. And so it was, you know.
But when you came back the next time, it was you kind of wanted to get released because.
I ended up asking to be released at that point.
Right, you asked to be.
Yeah, so basically.
Because of your now wife.
Yeah, it was a lot of things, man. You know, I was toying with my faith of like, me and my wife were now married, and I'm like, you know.
Oh, so did you get married while you were in FCW?
Yeah, we had actually eloped. We didn't tell anybody, and then we had a wedding on our 1-year anniversary after I was gone from FCW and home. But it was, man, FCW was just so weird, man. Like, you know, you weren't getting any real feedback. You know, you would never know if and when you were going to get called up. And like it
wasn't like the system they have now in NXT.
Yeah, and FCW, they were trying to keep it kayfabe and trying to keep it hush-hush to not expose the talent and try to not have them everywhere. And so it was really hard getting, you know, feedback. And you would watch guys like, I remember Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose pitched this really, really good idea, you know, to get called up to the main roster with that Joey, you know, Mercury helped them with. And then the office told them no. And then they took that very idea and did it with Miz and R-Truth in their thing they did with The Rock and Cena. And it just was like not, you know, it wasn't what they came up with because Miz and R-Truth weren't Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose.
Right.
You know, and you just see that happen again and again, man. And you just sort of
then guys didn't want to pitch ideas because they didn't want to get them taken.
And I remember saying to somebody, I was like, could you imagine this back in the day? Like if, you know, they'd have told Steve Austin, like, man, we really like this Stone Cold idea, but just not for you. And then they tried to make, you know, Stone Cold Billy Gunn. You know what I mean? Like, it was just that was, and then it was just also weird because the business had changed so much that, like, everybody was in trunks all the time for no reason. You would turn on Monday Night Raw, and guys that weren't even on the show were backstage in their trunks just in the locker room. Like, it was like this thing that everyone had to be in trunks. There were no singlets. There were no long tights. There were no jeans or like no characters. And it was just, you know, I just began, you know, to just really, at that point, I think I was 31. And I'm like, man, I would come home to visit my wife and my sons for like, you know, a couple days at a time, once a month. And then she would come down there. And, you know, I was growing in my faith at the time. And I'm like, man, I have this like family back home, and you know they won't give you a clear answer down there. You know, I can look back now and know, and I don't say this out of any kind of arrogance, I was a made man. It was just a matter of time. But because they're not giving you that feedback, nowhere in like corporate America or anywhere are you not being given some sort of feedback. That's like basic leadership, you know. And so I'm getting no feedback, and I'm like, man, I'm just done, you know. I'm just like, I'm tired of this. And so I wrestled with it for a while, and you know, to this day, Steve Kern was like my, you know, biggest mentor down there, wrestling wise, and you know, sort of spiritually. And I was talking with Shad quite a bit about this back then, you know, and he wanted me to stay, but he was gone himself too. He had left himself, and you know, so he understood it. And it was just one of those, like, you know, it's time to go. I'm going to ask to be released. And I sort of, we did promo practices on Wednesday down there, and Bret Hart was there. And I kind of knew, you know, Seth Rollins was in this like weird place down there too, where he was having his own deal. So I went on, you know, we would, the way it would work, we would tape TV on Thursdays for 3 weeks. You would tape 3 weeks worth of TV, then you do 2 house shows, then you tape again. Well, we were getting ready to do a house show the next night. So I know I'm going to go into promo practice on Wednesday. I'm going to cut a promo on Rollins, and he and I are going to work tomorrow night. And then, you know, I'm probably going to ask to be released the next day. And, you know, me and Rollins worked this match, and it was weird, man, because we got to talking, and he was so, you know, everybody's in their own zone because the business just wasn't, you know, the business is
right.
I sell for you, you sell for me, everyone gets over. So we go to, you know, we go to work, and it's like, but you're being drilled in, get yourself over, you know, that kind of thing being harped into you in certain ways, more from the guys than from the coaches, you know, but it just was what it was. And so I start talking the match over with Rollins, and I can see he feels hesitant. But then, like, I start, getting ideas that are like to take his stuff, and he's like, and then he just immediately realizes like what he's got, and we put this match together. And this one was non-televised. I have a DVD of it at home. Maybe I should put it on YouTube.
We got it up there.
No, that's a different match.
one?
That one's from like 8 months prior.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's still, those are some good pictures. We had this match. It was in front of like 30 people, but it was like this amazing match that we like walked in the back and the boys clapped for it, And Bret Hart was there. And the next morning in FCW, I know I have a phone appointment with John Laurinaitis in the afternoon that I'm going to talk to him. And I guess I forgot to say this too. That match with Seth Rollins, I blew my shoulder out, and I knew like crap, because my intention at that point in time was I'm going to come home to Baltimore. I'm going to let the dust settle. Ring of Honor had just moved to Baltimore. Me and someone there had talked, and I was like, maybe we'll have a conversation, right, and go from there. So I blow my shoulder out. I go into FCW the next morning. Bret Hart is like there with the guys that work the show, and he's like critiquing the matches, and he literally like he's pausing them, giving advice, the whole nine. Mm-hmm. He doesn't stop me in Rollins' match once, and then at the end of it, he stands up and he says, "Where are those two guys?" And we stand up, and he was like, "Those two are ready for the main roster." He was like, "I have nothing for you guys," and he was like, "All you guys here should be just trying to do what they're doing." Wow. And I was like, man, I was like, you're like, whoa. And then I'm thinking, then there's a cynical side of me that's like, he might have a plane to catch, because we were like the semi-main event. I was like, he might have a plane to catch, And
are you doubting what you're about
I'm like,
to do?
Bret Hart didn't really just say that to us and mean it. And so he takes the main event, was a 6-man tag, and the match was 15 minutes, and he spent 45 minutes critiquing it. And then like afterwards, he stood by and answered questions with us for another hour and a half, and he was like the last one to leave the building that day.
Right.
So I knew like it was solid.
It was sincere,
Yeah. And then, I had my phone call with John Laurinaitis about an hour after I left, and it was one of those things of like, I know what I got right now. And we get on the phone with John, and he's kind of giving me what I felt at the time was maybe some political runaround of like, dodging what our conversation was supposed to be about, which was a timeline to go on the road, to be out of FCW, to get a pay raise, the whole nine. I just didn't like what he was saying to me, and I wound up asking him to release me. And, he when I said that, he was like, "What did you just say?" And I told him, and he was like, I think you need to rethink that. And as soon as he said that, I was like, I felt like I knew my worth. And I was like, no, I want you to release me. And I said, and at that point in time, I had no idea. I blew my shoulder on that match. I didn't know I fully blew it out. I knew it was hurt, but I was like, I hurt my shoulder last night. I need to, and he said, well, the trainer already told me about that, basically. And so he agreed to release me from my contract, and they they sent me to the doctors, and it wound up being that I had a 9-month surgery and recovery process ahead of me.
And they took care of it.
Yeah, they took care of the surgery, 100% took care of the surgery, flew me to Alabama, still treated me like, I was great. Paid me throughout the whole process. They paid me my same salary I was making down in FCW while I was like going through the process, and they even had to extend it because the original timeline that it was on was not, it didn't, it expired, it was expired. And so, but I was still rehabbing. And so they gave me an extra month of pay. And then as I was finishing, at that point in time, I came home and, just bonded with my family, and it just, it was a rich time. I guess we like double what we're supposed to be. That's 2 segs.
Well, we cut some things out. Yeah. We're fine.
So I sort of settled into getting a job and having my wedding, and just, my life was full, man. And it was like, I realized it wasn't that I didn't love the business. It was like, I've always loved the business.
But now you're back here again. You've literally come full circle. We've gone on quite a journey with you tonight. But now you're back here again when MCW reopened in 2014. 2014. Yeah. Yep. You were on board as one of the coaches. Yeah.
So when we opened the school in 2014, and the model that we set forth with the school, like Dan Dennis and I, is still standing now. I think it's why MCW held up during the pandemic.
You pretty much kind of laid it out. Laid out the plan, because that was the agreement, and me bringing back to school. That
I was like,
I'm not doing that. I'm not coming down here. And
Well,
getting in the
we
ring.
laid out a plan for how to train, even from a business model standpoint. I had seen things Bubba and Devon did from a business standpoint. I saw stuff Steve Kern did with FCW, and I shared that with Dan and Dennis, and we were like, yeah, this makes sense.
You're
for
the reason
us,
we have a binder for training.
Yeah.
Yes, I know,
So,
with actual
yeah.
training things. It's not just show up and get in the ring and do whatever.
Right.
Like
Yeah, we have a curriculum.
We have a system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, Dr. Tom Pritchard he mailed me a copy of his book he wrote from the way he ran the developmental curriculum, and we took it right from that, and then we've done, other things with it over the years, man. And so it was, but, I was here for those first, I think, 6 months that the school was open, and, and then it was the same thing. It just became too much with my personal life and my home life. And so we kind of like passed the baton to RJ to just take my place on the night I was training guys. And he just came in, man, and like hit the ground running. And, just.
Well, that was his whole comeback year, too.
Yeah.
2014 really was when he just.
Right. And he ran, he did. He ran with it. And I tried to still come around and stay. I did, I worked a couple shows in 2015. And it wasn't in the cards. And I remember telling Dan, I'm like, dude, I will never be a guy that just shows up to a show and takes a spot from a young guy, and that was my thing. Was I wasn't training in the ring. I was training in the gym a little bit, and I was like, I gotta, kind of gotta step away. And then, we found ourselves, the end of last year, and talking with Dean Tyler that, there's a huge void here because RJ's not been here for a long time now. And, I had some things happen in my own personal life work-wise that I actually had the time in my schedule a little bit. And I was like, all right, let's do this. And the business bites you. I came down the first night and it was like, man, it's like riding a bike and, you just realize how much you miss it. And so, I've been trying to help out with the school. And, when we get back up and running shows, I'm hoping to, kind of help out behind the scenes there and just keep dipping my toes in the water and see how things go.
Well, you can't leave, which is a testament to all of us because we're all sitting here, each of us with 20 plus years with MCW. Yeah. So it's clear that we can't leave.
Yeah. I said this too, back when RJ passed away, and I've thought about this a lot lately, is that, man, no matter how far away you go from the business, like the people in the business really they do become like your family and your best friends and things like that. And you can go years without talking and seeing one another. And it's just because you all get each other because you've shared in a sacrifice and a pursuit and a grind and a struggle, that a lot of people can't relate to. And in the last 9 years I've been not as active in the business. I've met so many great people in life that, like, people I used to look down on that I realized just they kind of got a bad break, and they never, it wasn't that they couldn't have chased this and pursued it, but they just didn't. So it's not that person isn't an incredible human being, a hard worker, inspired, motivated, and driven, but they just can't relate to you in a way that you know what I mean, your people from the business will.
Yep.
All right, well, we're going to take one last break.
No break.
Okay.
No break. We were going on a roll. That's why I said we cut some things out. The break was the thing we cut out.
All right.
We were on a roll. I didn't want to interrupt, but if you want to take
no
us
station
home.
identification.
No station
No,
identification.
take
Well,
us
that was about a
home.
good 45 straight minutes. So I guess now we're going to go to our indie roundup, huh? I am so sorry that I'm off topic here.
Oh,
So
it's okay.
why don't you lead us into the next segment, please, Tara?
No, I thought that we were just going to tell our listeners
We're going to wrap
goodbye.
it up. Yeah.
Okay.
It's okay. We appreciate that you want to keep talking.
No indie
and
roundup this
hang
week.
up.
I'm sorry,
We
Larry.
don't have
No,
any
no, no,
story.
no, no. I just thought that there were a few topics that were going on in the
Oh,
indies
well,
that
what
we
did
were
you
going to
wanna
kind of
talk?
do a round table about to kind of close it out. But before we went to that,
You
I
see
thought we
this-
were going to
this
go to
is-
one more break.
Well, this is all here. We're live. We just blew.
We're
a
live,
big
pal.
spot.
Right?
We're
yeah.
live.
Yeah.
We're live, pal.
We're live, Sid.
Well, one of the topics that we were going to touch on very quickly at the end, we usually do, we either take questions from the cast or we touch on a couple of current events, and that was recent releases, and that's very timely. You were talking about your history and your, being released, asking for your release. This is, this cyclical nature of this business is that releases come, and sometimes those come to people that you don't expect. And recently, we've seen a lot of releases, and there's probably more on the horizon.
Yeah, and that just kind of happens at this time of year. I mean,
Yeah, it's
you know,
part of the
Well,
course.
It's not the end, just the
Yeah, and we talked about that a couple weeks ago.
And-
The
and listen,
post-WrestleMania releases.
right. And like even
know.
last year, the COVID ones. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, for us, like an indie, I think this is we need that to happen. And I mean, granted, the business has been shut down for a year because of COVID. But from an independent standpoint, you need some guys with TV time that have been up there to be new names like the Zack Ryders and stuff like that that can main event indie shows, because as an indie organization and you got like 3 major companies that contract people, Ring of Honor, AEW, and WWE, sometimes all the talent gets
Impact
in
and the NWA is still there's still ways to earn a living in the business. And that was a thing, like 9-10 years ago, man, if you got cut, like that was it. You could try to get into TNA, but TNA was harder to get into than the WWE back then. And so they got all these options to work.
And don't discount the indies. I really think
the indies are thriving.
I think the indies, I really believe the indies are going to thrive even more in this next year coming up, because many of the major companies they're not going to be doing house shows. They are going to. Some of them are going to be touring again, but some of them aren't. And they might only be touring in certain areas. And then for us, the Baltimore Arena, which is the big place for like AEW or WWE to run, is apparently
closing for 2 years.
Closing for 2 years for complete renovation. So for a company like that,
time for that.
Whatever happened to the idea of just putting another stadium down there near Camden Yards and Raven Stadium? Like, why wasn't that the plan? Like, what can they do to salvage that dumb
it's
place
money in politics, just
Baltimore
like everything
Arena.
else.
Of course,
money in politics. I remember a couple years ago, Ed Hale was trying to build in Lake Canton a new arena. And it was all money and politics that just couldn't get it done. He wanted to build a new arena and then tear that one down.
Yeah.
But here we are.
All right.
I have one that I wanted to bring up on last week's Indie Roundup, but for whatever reason, Phil didn't fill us in about this. So in a bit of sad news in the world of the independents, and it kind of affects us here, IWA Mid-South has officially lost the Axel Rotten Memorial Hall, which was an old Kmart that they named in honor of Axel after the wrestler. And did anyone see this? J.J. Allen did a stunt where he lit himself on fire, in particular right in between his legs, and then he took a weed whacker.
No, I didn't see that.
Okay, so it's
I'm going to pass on that one.
Well, I have zero interest in seeing that.
Too.
Well, now everyone has zero interest in ever seeing IWA Mid-South and the building they dedicated to Axel's memory. So
if that's the kind of stuff
kicked
you're
him out
going
of
to
the
put
building?
on, then
it's over now. He burnt himself up and burnt down Axel's legacy. So I wanted to mention it.
Wow.
On that note,
I wanted to mention it because I thought, wow, I do a lot of these hardcore shows, but never any kind of stunts like that where, the guy caught on fire and he ran right into the crowd. That's one of the reasons I'm surprised you didn't see this.
No.
Now, we were going to bring it up last week, but he got set on fire, and it was lighter fluid, and they couldn't put him out. He stopped, dropped, and rolled, and he just kept burning it, and then he started panicking and went right into the crowd, and that's why they lost the building.
So on that note, we need to put out this episode.
I think so too. Yes, stamp it out.
Pat, it was a pleasure having you.
Great being here. Thank you, guys.
All right, we're wrapping up. We'll see you next week for episode 21.
Next Tuesday at 8, we'll be
right here. And next
here.
Tuesday might be a time real quick. We might have the announcement on the first MCW show coming back. Hopefully, by the time we get here next week, we'll have a date.
We're going to hold it to it.
All right.
All right.
See ya.